As you reflect back and as you think about all the couples that you two have sat with, you've sat with so many couples over the years. What tends to bring harm? What tend to be the agents of harm in marriage?
Well, my first thought when you said that, harshness and judgmental tone of voice can certainly bring harm and shut the other spouse down.
There are crazy things that happen in our life, but when we have generosity and kindness, now we can almost go through anything. When it's contempt, even the small matters feel pretty large.
Friends, welcome back to the Wild at Heart podcast here in the week of May 19th. So glad you're with us. We have some close friends that we're going to bring into the conversation over the next couple weeks around marriage. We don't do that very often here. I don't know why, but we're not averse to talking about marriage. But this is a series, a two-part series, a conversation I think you're going to really enjoy listening in on with Stasi and me and our friends Dan and Becky Allender. But before we get there, we're going to take our pause. And before we get to that, I want to thank everyone again for your generous support. It just blows us away. We are so grateful. You know that we're a nonprofit and that we are supported by our friends, you. And it allows us to reach into all kinds of places around the world and bring a lot of healing and a lot of rescue to many, many lives. So we would ask if you would consider supporting us here in the month of May. And you can do so on our website. You can do so on our app. And we'll put a little link in the show notes where you go, click here to give. That'd be a real blessing to us. So thank you for your generous support. And now let's take our pause before we meet the Allenders. Oftentimes when I come into these pauses, I can feel the tension in my body that I wasn't aware of until I paused. And the tension in your body can alert you to the tension in your soul. Because as I step into these pauses at first, I often don't know what it is I do need to let go of. And so we say, Father, Jesus, Holy Spirit, what do I need to release right now? What do I need to let go of? Who do I need to let go? To take a moment to lay down all things as you invite me to do. Cast all your cares upon the Lord because he cares for you. What do I need to cast upon you right now, God? And I'm releasing these things with your help in order to get out of the pressure, get out of the performance, get out of the rush, and to come back to you, to just take a moment to recenter my life in you, God. So, Spirit of God, would you restore our union and breathe into me again? And then you have something for me in this week's podcast. Give me eyes to see and ears to hear how you're working in my life. Amen. Dan and Becky Allender, welcome to the podcast. It's great to see you guys and great to introduce you to our audience.
Oh, thank you, John, Stasi. So wonderful to be with you both.
Yes. What an honor to be with you right now. So thank you for inviting us.
We've never sat, the four of us have never sat in this context.
No, we've done podcasts together, but it's usually individually. But it's so wonderful to be here as couples.
I know.
But we have sat together a lot as a foursome over the years. We've known Dan and Becky for a very long time, and yeah, done vacations together and trips and visits to one another's homes over the
I
years.
know. So we've had a blessed and cherished friendship with them, which makes it extra fun to be doing a podcast together.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it is. So Dan and his colleague Steve Call have a new book out called The Deep-Rooted Marriage. And then Becky and Lisa contributed their stories into the book as well. So we are going to talk about the deep-rooted marriage. We are going to talk about some of the categories that beautiful categories that you're giving people to consider, but kind of more in a larger just marriage context.
Mhm.
We don't
Before we dive into this, yeah.
well in and out.
Okay, great. That's good.
Yeah. We don't talk about marriage a lot on the
Right.
Wild at Heart
True.
podcast. So this is a wonderful opportunity to do that. But before we do, I want our friends to get to know our friends. And so Dan and Becky, like just some basics. How long have you guys been married now?
48 and a half years.
The complication with that is we've been saying 48 years,
For
like 3 years.
our pastor said, wait a minute, you guys, you keep saying 48 years. So we actually had to, we're not good at math, obviously. And so we had to figure that out. So now we know it's 48 and a half.
I know you come to a point where it's hard to know.
A half. So what month were you married? Why are we at the half
Well,
here?
January. And I didn't do the math. It's maybe about
Okay.
half, but
Yeah.
yeah, there's always
Yeah.
a story if you have a January wedding. That's a not normal thing.
Yeah, exactly. Did you elope? What was the story?
Oh, it's so complicated. But let's just say we had our wedding postponed because Becky broke the engagement. Then we got another date, but I had to be in another wedding, so we canceled that. Yet it didn't get canceled for our newspaper and our parents' home. And then we got a third date, which happened to be in the coldest winter in Ohio's history. And we got married in a blizzard.
And you needed a 5-day waiting period for the blood work to be done. And that's when Jimmy Carter closed all the state office buildings. And so our pastor from Boca Raton, Florida, said, well, Dan, after the ceremony, you're going to have to take Becky to her parents, and then you can spend a night with your parents because we need to follow the rules of the law.
Well, because we couldn't get the 5 days in order for the minister from Florida to be given that power to marry in Ohio. So we were married illegally.
Okay, because I know you and I can't imagine you following that rule. So did you actually get married and then spend the night? No,
Yeah.
no way.
No, it gets a little wilder because there were 2 judges at our wedding. And when this came up at the reception where it needed to be signed, one of the other judges said to the judge who could have signed it, "You're coming up for election soon. If you don't sign this, you probably won't get elected." So we, and in one sense,
Because a lot of people had known some of the turmoil between the two families.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll just say it was
Okay.
like almost all portions of our story, somewhat bizarre and complicated.
You know what? While at Heart audience, it's actually really true. And as we get into the stories, the book that needs to be written someday, it needs to be written by Becky, and it's My Life with Dan Allender.
You've wanted that for a long time.
Because the stories are unbelievable. Dan, they're flying to Europe. Dan is gravely ill. He refuses to miss the outbound flight. So he's lying in the airport wearing an adult-sized diaper.
That is like fortitude.
Those are
You know?
classic Dan
That's
I
stories.
cheap.
like that.
Okay, but-
I like that. Fortitude. That's right.
Fortitude. And that's what this is one of the beautiful things about the book, The Deep-Rooted Marriage, is because you don't hold back. Like, it is filled with vulnerability and the complexities of your story, of your marriage, of, as you would say, rupture and repair. And it is so relatable then. And I laughed when I read it because some of it's just funny. And then it's also like, oh, but then so hopeful. So I just want to say, like, your stories are magnificent and you don't hold back in the book. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. At one level, how do you not, if you know something of the wonder of what it means to be forgiven, there really is no shame with this. There's embarrassment or a sense of sometimes like you wore an adult diaper on a plane. Yeah. But let's just say beyond oddity, there always is the potential with the freedom of Jesus to be able to enter stories that are hilarious and it's sometimes horrible. Both are part of every marriage. I guarantee it.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, rupture and repair it is one of the many motifs in the book. Let's just take our time through this.
Okay.
Let's talk about what we've seen. Let's talk about what we've experienced in both our marriages. As you reflect back, and as you think about all the couples that you two have sat with, you've sat with so many couples over the years. What tends to bring harm? What tend to be the agents of harm in marriage?
Well, my first thought when you said that, harshness and judgmental tone of voice can certainly bring harm and shut the other spouse down. And I'm very aware of that because I wasn't raised with a lot of kind, soft voices. And often my old voice that I'm not happy will shout out at Dan at an inappropriate time. So I'm very aware of how couples speak to one another.
It intrigues me that, the research of a couple called the Gottmans came to one central factor for divorce, and that's contempt. So when you begin to go, wait a minute, when we talk about Satan, the word Satan from the ancient Near East means the accuser. And the structure of accusation is almost always with a voice or the language of contempt. So when you begin to go, every marriage has moments where you feel unseen or unheard or neglected or worse, violated. And in that, contempt becomes one of the ways that we either turn against ourselves or turn against one another. And it feels like, if I can put it this bluntly, it's like joining the kingdom of evil. There's something about the power of contempt to bring harm to the other or to yourself that feels like you have unwittingly aligned yourself with your enemy. And so I would say that for us, there are crazy things that happen in our life, but when we have generosity and kindness, we can almost go through anything. When it's contempt, even the small matters feel pretty large.
That's a really good way of saying it.
Yeah.
Because you can bring up something really large with kindness and with respect, right?
Yes.
And you can talk through those things. But even if a small matter,
Yes.
why did you leave the garage door open one more time? Like the small things delivered with contempt can be deeply
so painful. And I know that for me, and I still do this, but just not as much as often, would be to withdraw. So if it's self-contempt about something, I did this again, or John's doing that again, or the accuser is busy in our marriage and I'm feeling accused by him, what I didn't know or understand what was going on there. And so I would withdraw and pull away emotionally, maybe not physically, but I was not available. And It was many years before John actually asked me about it. He would say, where did you go?
Mm.
And I didn't even know that I left. It's
Yes.
this whole journey of kind of growing,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yes. My
Yeah.
goodness. Yeah. So it's helpful to name contempt working
Yes.
in two directions.
Yes.
Because if it's self-contempt,
hmm
then it's shame, guilt,
Yeah.
withdrawal, self-punishment, that sort of thing. Yeah. And you guys use the category of honor and delight a lot. And that, way beyond the book, like in your language, in the way you talk about life. Why? Like, talk to us about honor and delight.
Well, gosh, it's so foundational, right? And I've always seen that with the two of you, John and Stasi. You delight in maybe a new dress, or you delight and honor in the meal that you have presented for us to eat, Stasi. We've learned a lot about how to honor and delight through watching your marriage, actually, and wanting to model the beauty and the joy and the love that, so I do think in some ways you might not have known it, but you were offering us a better way.
Yeah. What comes to mind is Amanda's wedding, where the two of you were dancing with a level of just playful joy. And it was, to this day, how many years? 15 they've been married? I don't know. But they still talk about how the two of you resonated with just joy. And so when I think about joy, I always have that realm of the invitation to dance and that picture of your playfulness. But to me, delight is the core of God's pursuit of us. It's where our hearts are meant to be so grateful. Just to that point of, I'm not just forgiven, but our God delights in us. And it takes something within me to actually go, really, is that humanly possible? And the answer is, no, it's divinely possible. And to join God's delight in us with that same sense of, like, we were walking yesterday and I picked up a stone. In large measure, I remember watching you pick up a stone when we were walking in Arizona. And it's like, I think I need to get more present. I'm beginning to just, our conversation's getting a little more distracted, and I want to honor her, but I have to be present to do that. So I picked up a stone, and it just helped me get back into the engagement. So the interplay of delight is gratitude. Honor always brings a sense of wonder. And to me, that's the core of worship, awe and gratitude.
I love hearing that choice that you made. The deep-rooted marriage. You made a choice to be rooted. You wanted to be more grounded in the moment. And isn't that marriage like 1,000 million choices to stay present or get present or not see with contempt, but delight, even in our weirdness. One of my favorite things about John is
Ruh-roh. Hang on, folks. Where's inside? John panics. Where's this going?
This is a good thing. This is a very good thing. Okay. Do you know the word snarky?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I can be snarky, or I'm just like upsy here with something and it's way out of proportion. And so I'll say it in my justified way. And the way John often responds is he sees right through it and he will laugh. He will just laugh, sometimes doubling over in laughter. And I don't feel laughed at. I feel like he's pulling back the curtain of the absurdity of what I was upset about and just being able to laugh at myself rather than him be taking offense at my whateverness, but just I love that.
Yes.
That has rescued me so many times. So
There's-
that feels like even in delighting in my brokenness and the ways I'm not yet restored to who I'm meant to be. That's
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to bring our listeners along.
Okay.
And so I want to actually start in the present moment, because you talked about walking together. Dan and Becky, you guys walk every morning and pray for like 45 minutes, an hour.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And how long have you been doing that together?
Oh, I think during COVID.
COVID.
Yeah.
The beginning of COVID, when we're so disconnected from everyone, we needed like more time to get. We had more time, but we needed more time. And it became clear that we weren't doing well watching TV. And so like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock became our time to go to bed, which allowed us to get up quite early. And then, to have focused time each individually with Jesus, but then we needed to come together. And that coming together was that 45-minute loop. We have beautiful forests near us. So some of that is walking through thick Pacific Northwest forest. And it's life-giving.
I think we needed that for the guardrails, especially of COVID, and how to live in delight with one another and trusting God. So we have our morning. That is so important. It sets the tone for our whole day.
Yeah.
And then we try, because we're in our 70s, we have a bit more time. We try and also walk 1 or 2 more times together. The walking, abiding in each other's hearts and with God. So it's a beautiful, wonderful practice.
It's really beautiful. It really is. And it's just a lovely example of choosing to be together, choosing togetherness, choosing
that intentionality.
Yeah. And giving one another attention.
Yeah.
You have my attention.
Yeah.
You have my ears, my eyes, my focus. So we're going to both go back into our early years in a moment here, but how would you describe your marriage at this point? What are you growing into now?
I think we're growing in the hallowedness of living each day. As so many, quite a few of our friends have passed on or others are ill, we are very aware of how each day is a gift and is holy. And with that, and that's a choice to keep that in our hearts and minds, because I think it propels us to be kinder, have more wonder, have more gratitude. So I think whoever thought that older age would allow a deeper and kinder, more hopeful way to abide together. Because it didn't look like that for our parents when they got older.
I think of the word generosity. Too long a story, but we went shopping, grocery shopping yesterday. We had 2 separate carts. We had 2 separate lists. We finally chose 2 separate checkout points. She beat me, and we're going to the car. And as we get to the car...
Let me just say, I didn't know it was a race. We usually go on the same but for some reason, I'm like, here's this one, and, who knows? And so I didn't quite understand when you kind of looked at me and said, you're winning.
Yes. Anyway, it was a game. We get to the car, and Becky goes, what's going on with our car? And I'm like, I don't know. What? She goes, it's running.
I said, you left the car on. But the first thing Dan said was, I would appreciate if you would never tell our friends this. So here he is.
Well, we've begun to talk about, what level of shame do I have that I'm that distracted that I leave a car running in a parking lot. And I'm like, Okay, well, that's a real problem.
I'm like, we got to cut this out.
But
this is not a good
But it was
thing.
back to that image of Becky's laughing. And I'm like, I am so bitten
Mm.
at that moment with self-incrimination, shame, what an idiot. And she's genuinely laughing.
There you
And
go.
it was
There
so
you go.
kind.
Yes, yeah, I know.
So
And I was like,
kind.
uh-oh, another level here we've entered into. Yikes.
So, I think that level of going, wow, I know I can be in other worlds, but this was one of the more significant and severe.
So I have a little bit more of a job these days than
Oh, you guys, I've done it twice.
Ah!
Twice.
Oh my goodness.
I've come out from the long grocery and I'm like, what does that sound? What was happening?
That's right.
Is there a car running next to me? Holy cow, it's my car.
Okay. Well,
It
wow.
happens.
High five, girl.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're describing a greater generosity towards one
yes.
another,
Mm-hmm.
describing kindness towards one another that might not have marked your early years.
But can I just add one more thing that I'm
Yes.
seeing? Because I know this about your walks together, how you're in scripture together, how you're sharing that, how you pray together. So there's all of this beautiful things that you're sharing. But the central figure in this is God, who's is you're uniting together in Christ. So I don't want to miss that. Like,
Yeah, thank
yeah.
you.
That's really good, Stace.
mhm.
So contrast that with your early years.
I think much more critical, much more busy in a kind of self-consuming way, where, yeah, I would still say there was a desire to serve Jesus, but it was so much more about getting things done, being quote unquote in control and successful, making things move, and kind of at some level, who knows when, where, and how, stepping back and going, there is no relationship on this earth that more reveals my heart for God than our marriage. And then, even though I've written a couple books on marriage, which at some level always creates both that discrepancy and irony, like I am not, I think I've written well, I'm not living well. And coming back to that, what is keeping my heart from being fully open to serving and enjoying my wife always has to do fundamentally with idolatry. Like I'm caught in things that are not of God. It may be about God, but it's not of God. So I think our growing together in Jesus has been, as obvious as it may sound, it's been the central thing of coming to love one another more. I would say that would be one for me.
Mm-hmm. And I think in a lot of respects, I go back to our beginning years, and as much as we really did like each other and love each other, but you had a very critical tone often. And I was one to find fault with myself often. And so I think I was looking to you for like, what's the right thing to do? And it was, Dan was an assistant, a pastor at a Presbyterian church. And so I felt on the outside, you were with the elders. And so you were instructing me a lot about how to understand the church scene, which was different from the Methodist scene. So I think we clung to each other also.
Yeah.
So it's both and. Yeah. I'm so glad we're not there right now. You know,
Ugh.
it was a hard place.
Yes. Once is enough to go through that. Yes.
Yeah.
This kind of is similar to our story.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, because we so in love, and is my favorite person.
Yes.
And I came in with, so I didn't know my own story. I came in, just blithely, and I took my cues from others, how I'm supposed to be, I didn't feel like I was good enough in my own. So always taking my cues. And so John, I took my cues from him, and I lost who I was. Like who I was didn't matter, but who he was mattered very much. And so that was damaging in our marriage, because it wasn't helping him become more himself or helping me become more myself. It was trying to be someone else. And we weren't far in our walk with God yet.
No.
So it wasn't always done kindly, or in love or with patience, right?
Well, so this is the kind marriage describing backwards. So I need to get a little more confessional. I was a perfectionist, and I would critique Stace on everything, how you're chopping vegetables. I mean, just everything. Which I hate that now, but young, insecure, trying to do life right and look good in front of others.
Right.
And using pressure as security, right? Using perfection as a source of control. This is how we will control the unpredictable nature of life. Yeah. So, there was a lot of harm done. I did a lot of harm to you in the early years through my drivenness.
Yes. Yeah.
And perfectionism.
Yeah.
Cloaked in Christianity.
Right.
Which is crazy making, right? That's where it's really crazy making. I mean, if you're throwing dishes and, yelling at each other, it's just very obvious.
Yes.
That something's not good.
Right. But I would take it in. I mean, obviously he's right and I'm doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And then we didn't know each other's. I mean, you just go like this, right? How your stories intersect, your brokenness just goes, that fits well.
Yeah.
So the first conflict that we had, and we didn't have a ton. It was more subterfuge, more underneath. And we were at the dinner table. You remember this. And I don't even remember what it was about. I mean, maybe he wasn't happy with the spaghetti. It was something very something that I would say this, get over it, like he wouldn't even say it now, but at that point it was a piercing. And so I got up from the table and I left. Yeah. Now you remember. And he comes looking for me because he wants to pursue, he in that moment knows, wants to have the conversation. He can't find me. He doesn't know where I am. He's looking throughout the house and he does finally find me. And I'm literally hiding in the closet. I've gone into the bedroom, gone into the closet and closed the door. And that was a revelation, I think.
Yeah. For both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And then, okay. So you get to the point in your marriage where you have an epiphany that things are not well. I'm just thinking of the folks that are going, honor and delight. There's no honor and delight here. Generosity and play. There's no generosity and playfulness here. Sometimes in moments of clarity, people make decisions to leave the marriage rather than look for redemption and repair.
Yeah.
Because the clarity comes, and because you haven't seen it for 15 years or 25 years, it just feels so defining, right? How did you guys stay in?
Well, I was thinking of Pamela. Well, but there's a couple of things to say.
Go for it.
All right. And Dan will bring it back together with, I might ramble a little bit, but I think Dan was traveling pretty much from the get-go. So we would have this period where if we were not happy with one another, we had this calming down period. And then the joy of returning. So I think that was very real. We did love each other, but we weren't loving as well as Jesus would have wanted. And I think then Pamela entered our life. Dan was talking a lot about story. And then we had a woman that actually drew me out and then said, well, Dan needs to hear this. And so we really had a rescue with a very, very godly woman that we loved dearly until she passed away. And
What did that rescue look like?
Dan had been doing supervision seminars, and there was one woman I could tell that he really respected her, unlike any other person I'd ever heard him talk about. And so we were going to a conference, and I knew that this woman, Pamela Reeve, was going to be there. So we saw her right away. Let's have breakfast in the morning. And our breakfast was, I had Andrew, who was maybe 6 months old or something. And then after breakfast, we stood up and Pamela said, I really wanted to meet Becky, because Dan had talked the whole breakfast with Pamela. But she stood up and said, I really wanted to meet Becky. Becky, do you want to have breakfast tomorrow? So I think there was a
Wow.
collision of Dan was such a man of words and of the heart that everyone did want to hear Dan. But it was clear to Pamela that I needed hearing too.
And I think is in that context, she drew out some of Becky's past sexual harm in a way that I knew of it, but didn't have the courage to engage it, which becomes tragically ironic, given that I had already written The Wounded Heart, a book on sexual abuse. So here, my beloved wife has stories I don't have the courage to enter, but I'm writing about for the sake of others. And this woman saw, in some sense, my arrogance and contradiction, yet saw my good heart and drew her to name her story in a way in which put us in a collision of, are you, Dan, really willing to enter your wife's heartache and story, even though you'll do it for others? Are you willing to do it on her behalf? It was truly one of those moments of exposure that would seemingly lead to judgment and shame, but actually opened the door again just to the wonder of the goodness of Jesus and to the wonder of how broken stories have a chance to begin to be healed when you taste kindness. That passage in Romans, it is the kindness of God that leads to repentance. I tasted Pamela's kindness. I tasted Becky's kindness. And I think in some ways it was one of those deep transitional moments for us to engage one another's lives and story with a whole lot more integrity and an openness than what we had done up to that point.
That's a courage on both of your parts, didn't it?
It really did. Yeah, take courage. And I was good at serving. I've always wanted to be married. We really, that would work well. And you were good at, bringing people into a greater understanding of Jesus. So it worked for a long time until it didn't work. And so we do say that we just know that Pamela was a gift from Jesus to us, and it has changed us in a night.
And I just want to press into that a little bit more. So, Becky, part of that was giving you a voice.
Yeah.
But describe what she drew out. What is it that changed for you that then impacted Dan?
Well, I think I've been a quiet person. And I do think that Jesus gave her curiosity, who was married to Dan. And I do know that she listened to Jesus, and I shared with her things I never would have considered sharing. I put it back, forgive and move on is what I thought the Christian way was. But yet there was a big problem with that, especially if we were to remain married for the long haul. So she gave me an audience with only the love of Jesus, with no condemnation. And she was safe, very safe. I don't know. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
And that was probably the first time, right, that you were able to tell your story
It
to
was.
somebody.
It was.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so curiosity is one of the categories in the book,
Mhm.
the new book, The Deep-Rooted Marriage, like curiosity and how it can help marriage.
Yes.
What were you struck by that? Because you told me about that as curiosity is one of the categories.
Well, it's just it's a whole posture of heart
Mm.
versus the self-protective, or, I think when I got married, I was giving John the opportunity of a lifetime to love me. And you get to play the role of, I had it without knowing, I had a very self serving approach.
Mm.
And I really wasn't very curious about your life and your story. And I certainly wasn't curious about mine.
Yeah.
It was the same as you, Becky. It's like the old is gone, the new has come. Don't look back, press forward. Like that's unimportant. So I didn't honor my own story, nor his, nor was I actually curious about it. But as it began to, our marriage began to unfold and we began to play out of our own personal histories, the curiosity is so vital to understand one another. Where is that coming from? Why do I react that way? Why do I hide in the closet? I mean, I remember actually the first time that we were having a conflict where I had one foot in the bathroom ready to close the door and one foot on the other side. And it was such as, I'm really trying to stay here with you, but I just want to retreat. And it was his curiosity. Why? What's in you that's causing that? Because I'm safe. But I didn't feel very safe in the face of any kind of conflict, right? So that curiosity is so loving.
Yes. Dan and Becky, curiosity.
Well, I think for us, I find her, I don't, it may sound too academic, but fascinating. Like she will put words together. She will put thoughts together. Like this morning's walk, we had an owl fly right in front of us. But I was literally thinking about something and had my head down and I didn't see it. I could hear her joy at that moment in which the owl passed. And I'm like, how did you see that? But we've had moments, another owl story where we're walking and it's dark and she goes, stop. I'm like, what? She goes, there's an owl somewhere. I'm like, what? She pins it. She looks into a tree and it's like, can you see her there? And I'm like, barely able to see. So the reality that this woman sees things I don't see and then has the capacity to bring a level of life, of intrigue to it. So I may not be that intrigued about the world around me, but I'm intrigued by her intrigue with the world. So in so many ways, she translates me into realities I don't naturally see without your help. So,
and that would go back to story, right? That I was praised by my father if I would see the wind ahead of us as we were racing in a regatta. The ripple, I knew where to move slowly so you'd get the most out of the wind in the sails. So I do look around, and so it's just. But again, that's that curiosity. What about this guy's story that's in his head when So I think there's just. It's not like we know each other's stories fully because we've even forgotten our own stories. So to be, interested in life, it's been a lot more tender and fun than it was earlier on when we were so into getting things done.
yeah.
Yeah. In the book, holding out curiosity as a different way of handling conflict, right? It is, there's a strong reaction to something. And instead of going to defense, self-protection or a quick explanation, like, wow, tell me more. Like, share with me why you're having such a strong reaction to this, or to your mom, or to something that just happened at work. Curious to one another, right? Curious to reactions, curiosity pulling out the deeper matters rather than just quickly trying to solve things. And curiosity is just a much kinder way of reacting to what could be offensive.
Yeah, it's so much more gentle.
Right? Like, whoa, babe, those are strong words. Where's that coming from? Or, wow, you look really exhausted right now. How was your day? What happened? Yeah.
It's so good to ask questions.
Yeah. Asking questions. So if you could go back and counsel your younger marriage, I want to hear your version and I want to hear ours. So if you think back on first 10 years, and we're going to do this for each stage of marriage, but first 10 years, early marriage, looking back now, what would you counsel the younger marriage? Not just the younger you, but the younger marriage, the thing that's happening.
Well, my first thought is, don't worry about your parents and your family of origin. Like, they weren't the standard of how life should be. I would give that up.
Wow.
So fast.
That's impressive, because it was exactly the same. It'd be when you read in Genesis 2 to leave your mother and father, it might be really helpful to know, Dan, that your loyalty to your mother, having had to take care of her for a lifetime, is going to impinge on the true loyalty, not only to your wife, but to Jesus. So you might want to think about what it means to leave, truly leave, not dishonor, but leave your mother and father. So I think that would have taken...
My goodness. Wow.
Oh,
we never read that in a book. We didn't have anyone tell us that. That's
right?
So cool.
Yep.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah,
That's
it
so
is.
good.
That's really good.
Yeah. What would you say?
For us?
Yeah.
I would say, oh, sweethearts, you love one another. You really do. But you are both living and reacting out of your families of origin. You're living and reacting out of wounds and ways that you've learned survival.
Yes.
Let's go take a look at that. Can we go take a look at that?
That's good.
Because we didn't until things got bad. We got very close to divorce at the 3rd year of marriage and at the 10th anniversary. And often it does take crisis. Often it just does, right? Till your stuff stops working, you don't tend to look at your stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But I would just gently say, oh, John and Stacey, you love each other, but you are living on a practical way completely out of your brokenness and your woundedness and your self-protection. Let's go have a look at that.
Oh, that's so good.
What would you say?
Rather than waiting 10 years before going.
And then having to do it in a crisis context. Yeah.
Going, help. So just, I don't know if this is for everyone, but I'm taking yours because that was really good.
Oh gosh, my family? Yikes. I totally needed to do that because they were looking to me. We still lived in the same, city. Wow. And they were looking to me to be the man of the larger family.
Yeah.
And
your father
that was
wasn't.
so inappropriate.
Yeah.
And
And that shift of like learning one another's families too, because we didn't live that far from my mom either. Once a month we'd see her. And John's mom was only kind to me, and once a week or twice a week was the norm for the Eldredge family. So just all of that. But I would say to my younger self, to believe that you loved me, to actually believe it, so that I could rest in it.
Yes.
Yeah, you're going to come to believe it, darling. You're going to really come to know this. But if you can operate from that rested place, it'll go so much better for you.
Mhm. That's good.
Yeah. And then what would you say to the young family years? So like late 30s, your late 30s marriage.
Mm.
What would you, looking back, say, oh, guys, I wish you would have?
You want to go?
First. You go first this time.
I mean, I was in the middle of teaching, a part of a significant ministry, doing my doctorate at that point, and our bodies were falling apart, in part because we both had levels of stress and, exhaustion, stress, illness. And it's like, do you see what drivenness is doing to your life? Are you aware at some level you are killing yourself out of the fear that your long-term internal assault that you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, you're not wise enough, you're not smart enough, and you will have to outwork everyone in order to get even the basics of life. I mean, it was a period in which both fear and ambition combined to create just ugly drivenness. So just to be able to go, it's not worth it. And you need to trust that God has something really good for you that you can't make on your own.
Yeah, that's really good, honey, because the drivenness is catching, right? And so you were also traveling and writing a book and counseling and doing so many things. We were having students in our home all the time, and the students were like our church in a way, because we lived at Grace Seminary. It was in Winona Lake. So every year, every 9 months, a new group of maybe 80 families would come for the counseling. And we were like, it was a church. And then, so we were worn out. Yeah, I think we had 8 major surgeries in our 30s.
What?
Between the two of us.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then we had infertility, we had miscarriages, and you had back surgery and C-sections. It was just like, and you had been working since you were 9 years old. So we had that work ethic too.
I'm, even talking about it, I'm like, part of me just wants to put my head on the table and weep. It's a miracle we made it through that period together. Yeah. But I think, again, it was also part of the period in which Pamela came in. There were so many signatures of the goodness of God that somehow, even in the midst of the insanity, felt like a moment of grounding that got us through. But, oh my gosh, to be able to speak to that younger Dan and be able to go, you don't have to make as much as you are working as the basis of the provision, but also the sustaining of your life and your marriage.
So I think the words I would have said to myself was, why don't you rest? And you don't have to do it all. And remember the joy of the Lord and of your family. Abide there more.
Yeah.
That's good.
How would you counsel our late 30s marriage?
Late 30s. That's a hard question. I'm going back. Okay, what if like 38, 39? Because I think the huge shift happened in our marriage at around 34, 35.
Yes.
And that for me was when I really came to know the love of God. I loved him. I believed he loved me, but there was a deep knowing. So I remember this shifted everything when we had a conflict. And, it would make my stomach just bleh when John would say, I need to talk. Can we talk? That was it. And I'd be like, the world is going to fall apart and swallow me up and I'm going to die. That's what it felt like. And so I remember the first time that you said it and we were sitting on the stairs and I didn't feel like that. And what I was saying to myself was, I am held by the love of God. My Father loves me. No matter how this goes, I'm okay.
Oh, wow.
And then from that posture, I was able to hear and not fall apart, like actually engage and stay in.
Yeah.
And that was a big shift. But what would I say in that age? I would tell myself not to fear my vulnerability, not to fear my weakness, because I would really strive to be strong and to do it and get her done and have all that. And of course, no human being can do all those at all times.
Yeah.
And so I would say that, like, you can be kinder to yourself. You can be merciful to yourself, and you can share and love from your weakness without being judged and cast aside. So that took a while.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm in awe, actually. The four of us, and we don't have time to do this, but the four of us came out of incredibly broken stories, and brought into our marriages profound levels of trauma.
Yes.
And that we are, at 48 and a half years this year, and we're at 42. And doing so well.
Yes.
I just want to fall on my face and thank God.
Amen.
And the people that helped us get there. Because it was in our mid-30s, early 30s, mid-30s that we both went to therapy. And it was, it's life-changing, right? It changed your marriage when you go deal with your heartache.
Yeah, which comes to honoring your story and loving one another. So I want to read just this little bit that Becky wrote in one of her stories. And she talks about, I'm not going to read the whole thing beforehand, but it was her own hurt and brokenness. And she said, but I choose to tend to it because I want to heal. I'm progressing in my climb of healing in my 70s. It's never too late to care for the body, soul, and heart. It is never too late to become the person you're meant to be and to love your partner with more ferocity and love. It is never too late to tend to your trauma.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're actually just going to let that be the close of the first half of this and just say, wow, that's something for everybody to think about. And with that, we're going to sign off this week knowing that there's a part 2. That's a lot to think about. That's a lot to let God into. And for our single friends and various stages of life, thank you for listening in with us. The pursuit of the heart remains the same. God's pursuit of your heart and what he's working on in this season of your life. And so maybe that question can linger for you is, okay, Papa, what are we doing? What is the healing and redemption and character building that you are working on in me in this season of my life as a single? And we'll see you all next week.
Hey friends, this is Alan. Thanks for being part of this week's podcast. And before you rush off into what's next, we invite you to spend some time reflecting with God on what you've heard and on where he's leading you.